And Emlyn, I'm going to make you a co-host too, so you can let folks in. Um, well, really excited to kick off this webinar Zoom session with Mike Malloy. I first met Mike, I think it was a couple months ago, and we were connecting on sort of how his work might overlap with Venture for America and the ways that he might be able to support. Mike is the co-founder or founder of Malloy Industries, where he provides fractional support to CEOs in all different capacities. He's also, I believe, a lecturer as well, and teaches all sorts of courses that have to do with startups, entrepreneurship, how to rock your startup roles, your internships, jobs, all of those things. And I have to say, from a personal note, is probably one of the most incredibly helpful people I have met in the last couple of months. I think he sent me over, yeah, you are, Mike. He sent me over at least 50 resources that can support Venture for America fellows and alumni, and we're working on getting those out to all of you today. So really excited to have Mike with us here. If you all could join me in TCVFA fashion and give him an off-mute round of applause just to kick it off. Woo, we are excited. We are excited to have you here. Mike, hopefully my intro was okay. You can fill
You
in
nailed it.
the
Yeah.
rest. And
Yeah.
then I'll hand the floor over
Loved
to
it.
you.
Super pumped to be here. We've got about 45 minutes, and my goal is to help everybody on this Zoom leave the meeting more confident going into job interviews, job applications, resumes, cover letters. There's a lot of confusion, worry, anxiety. Am I doing it right? Like, why are people not interviewing me? Why do I get interviews, but then I don't get jobs? I'm going to give you a variety of pro tips and resources. And before we do that, I want to do a lap around. And Med, you came on video first, so I'm going to call on you and have you then popcorn to somebody else to basically just share your name, your city, and I'll put this in the chat for everybody. What's your unique ability or superpower? And then what's one thing you want to better understand by the end of today's session? I did read through all the responses as people registered, but just I want to make sure I cover what the most burning question or issue you have is. So Med, let's start with you and then popcorn around.
Sounds good. So yeah, my name is Med Fresgy. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. My unique ability, I would say, I think just building relationships and keeping like my friends close. I had a bunch of roommates in college. I feel like we did a okay job of like staying close, but I make sure to like call everyone, make group chats, you know how it is. And then something I want to better understand at the end of today's session. I feel like I find myself not getting many first round interviews. So I think just securing more first round interviews, putting that best foot forward, it'd be amazing to know.
Med, let me ask a simple question. Do you have
Yeah,
one version of your resume, or do you make a different version of your resume for each job that you apply to?
I have like hundreds right now.
Okay. All right,
I
cool.
have a lot, but yeah.
The greater than one was the answer. We can probably get less than 100. And
Yeah,
so
true.
we'll go through some pro tips there. Pick
Yeah, for
somebody to
sure.
go next.
Popcorn, Sujana.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sujana. Um, Sorry, let me just open the chat so I make sure I'm saying the right things. Okay, I'm from Bakersfield, California. Unique ability, I would say just being empathetic and being able to listen to people and understand their grievances well. One thing I want to better understand at the end of today's session is, I think similar to Med, just understanding how to translate like resumes into interviews, into, I guess, eventually job offers, because that's been a difficult process so far. And
And
oh,
so,
sorry.
John, I wanted to highlight something that you did really well that everybody can do in their interviews is you repeated the question as you were answering, like something I want to know by the end of the session. That's a great thing to do in interviews because it gives your brain 5 seconds to think about anything intelligent to say at the end of the sentence, while you can also smile and nod and like build rapport with whoever asked it, as opposed to being like, well, this is what I think,
Yeah.
So good job on that. Yeah, pick someone to go next.
I'll pass it off to Curtis.
Yeah, so I'm Curtis. I am calling from South San Francisco. My unique ability, I would say, is ability to listen and really make people feel heard. I really enjoy listening to other people yap for like hours and hearing what they have to say. So I think that's something that I do reasonably well. And one thing that I want to better understand at the end of today's session is, I guess, where to find good opportunities and, how
Yeah.
to really maximize and go about them. I know that's kind of broad, but
Yep. And
came into this with a broad mindset. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And Julia, correct me if I'm wrong, is the best place to find good opportunities on VFA's job board portal?
Connect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But that's also another thing that I wanted to bring up is that it doesn't seem like there's much opportunities there.
Yeah, and we can talk about how you approach a job search with the opportunities that are available to you and mindset and how to make the most out of that and what you might learn and where you can tailor your skill sets, etc. But this conversation is definitely tailored towards Connect Adventure for America.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Curtis, pick someone to go next.
Yes, I will pick Josh.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Josh. I'm calling from Fort Myers, Florida, and I think my unique ability is, I guess, knowing how to balance a conversation. I think balancing between like not just talking about myself, but also shooting questions back at the person to make sure that they're being heard and like I care about like what they're thinking in their lives type of thing. So having that good balance. And then I guess one thing I really want to better understand from today's session is, I guess, kind of leveraging your network and how to kind of like contact someone and not be like, oh, do you have like openings for a job, but like know how to build a relationship type of thing. I'm not sure if that made sense, but that's kind of what I really want to
Totally
better
makes sense.
understand. Yeah.
Two ideas to rip on that. One, outside of a job interview, anytime you're in a conversation with somebody, if they speak 70% of the time, they're going to think it was an awesome conversation. It doesn't even matter what they said. If you ask me about ultimate frisbee and then I spend 10 minutes just telling you all about my ultimate frisbee career, like I'm going to love talking about it. You may not necessarily care that much, but I'm still going to think it was a great interaction. And so be cognizant that you're not just sucking up all the oxygen in a conversation, which Josh sounds like is one of your unique abilities. And I think you can absolutely reach out to friends and former coworkers or like people in your neighborhood to ask for advice. There's this old saying in fundraising, if you're trying to raise money from investors, like ask for money, you get advice. Ask for advice, you can get money twice. In this case, if you ask for advice, people, generally speaking, want to help other people, especially if they're one or more rungs above you on the totem pole, because they can empathize with, oh yeah, I remember when I was getting out of college and like my first job and like my last job search. You're not saying, hey, will you please hire me? You're saying, hey, I'm looking for advice. Like, could we hop on Zoom? Could we go get to Starbucks? I'll buy you a coffee. Maybe you bring out a print copy of your resume and a cover letter and like ask them to mark it up with a pen. Or one of the things I'm going to mention later is like do mock interviews with people to practice answering questions in a low stakes, friendly environment where like even if they're not a professional HR recruiter, they know how to be like, hey, that was a good answer, or that was really weird. Why did you say that? Like, I don't understand what that even means or why that was relevant. And we'll talk later on about star stories and how you can kind of practice answering a tell me about a time when question by highlighting the situation, the task, the action you took, and then so what were the results as a result of you doing something. So there's definitely ways to like tap into your network to get advice, and then they may end up also knowing somebody who's hiring, things like that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, pick someone to go next, Josh.
I'll popcorn to Jose. I'm not sure if that's correct.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, hey guys, I'm Jose. I'm calling in from Austin, Texas. Ability is probably knowing how to understand individuals and know where they're coming from. Oftentimes conversations, usually the quiet one, but I feel like I can understand like where people are coming from. And things that I want to improve is just knowing, getting better at the technical skills to get past the first round interviews.
Have you had any specific technical interviews where there's been a technical stumble? Like, tell me more about it.
I don't think I've had like a stumble, but there was this one case where it was about 45 minutes and it's just like a bunch of questions with stars where I had to use the star method a bunch of times. And I was getting to the point where I was running out of examples. So I think just knowing like how I can tailor one example to, or like multiple examples and how it can be creative would be very, very good.
For sure. And I think a big part of that is the prep and not just like going into an interview with 2 or 3 stories, which like maybe can get you through a 15-minute interview. But if it's gonna be 45 minutes, hey, let's dig a little bit deeper. Are there like sports teams you were on in high school or elementary school that you could reference? Was there a community service project? Was there a thing in your dorm at some point in college? Did you do anything in, in your church or youth group? Or having a diverse set of stories will help you be able to not just feel like you're telling the same story 7 times. Yeah. Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
Jose, pick someone to go next.
Pick Kian.
Hey, so I'm Kian and I'm in DC right now. I'd say I guess my unique ability would be pretty similar to Jose's. I can see like the other side. Like I don't really like to see like no you're right and you're wrong, right? It's like I can see like the right side or some rights to that and some wrongs. So yeah. And I guess one thing I want to do better is maybe knowing how to negotiate salary and win, right? Yeah.
All right. So salary is one lever in the total compensation package for a job. One of the best ways to, and I'm not going to say win, I'm going to say like optimize, because ideally it's a win-win, like everybody feels good about it, is to have more, and it's true for any negotiation, to have more variables to negotiate on. So like, can you work remotely some days? Like, what's the vacation policy? Is there health insurance? Can you get a better plan? Like, are they going to get you a work phone? There's a variety of different things. And let me drop this
Gotcha.
resource here in the chat as well, with job variables to consider. And so thinking about them, and before you go into the negotiation, kind of ideally like identifying what's your highest goal for each of these things, what's the range that you're willing to accept, and then what's your walk away point where like, hey, I'd love to earn between 50 to 60K. Anything above that is amazing, but I won't take less than 45K. And so if somebody offers you a 30K job, there's no way to, even with adding in other perks, that's worth it. And the reason you define this before you go into the room is so that it's a logical decision. It's not emotional, because when you're in the room and like at the table negotiating, emotions come into play more so. And so you want to have clear kind of boundaries set up. I have another resource called a preparation checklist that I'll find and share with you guys afterwards to help with negotiations.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ken, pick popcorn to somebody to go next. Expand the
I
pie. Love that, Julia.
has Islam gone?
I don't think so.
Hello. All right, my name is Islam Yahya. Calling out of New Jersey. Unique ability. I feel like I'm pretty easygoing. I feel like I could get along with people pretty well. One thing you want to better understand at the end of today's session. I guess learning how to navigate like interviews better and kind of like getting um to the second round interview. I feel like I've gotten a lot of first rounds, but haven't gone past that. So yeah.
We'll definitely touch on that. Pick someone to popcorn too.
Okay. Kaylee.
Hi, I'm Kaylee. I'm from Toledo, Ohio, and my unique ability, I really enjoy working in teams, and I feel like I can facilitate ideas pretty well and create like a good environment for people to share their ideas. And something I want to learn more about today is, how to ask questions that flow. Um, questions to ask in the first round versus like the third round.
And we do have a resource here that I'm going to drop with a set of questions that can help. And I would say a lot of them are appropriate for the first. I wouldn't ask about the budget or the compensation or salary and stuff in the first round. Third round, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's understand what's this offer entail. But we can dive into that more as well. I think one or two more folks. Vivian, you put in the chat, and so did
yeah, and Bintu. I
yeah.
think they've shared in the chat.
Okay.
So I think we have everyone. And
All right,
Evelyn's
awesome.
my colleague, who I forgot to introduce you to from the beginning. So she's our senior operations and today manager of experience and operations at BFA.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. And so thank you everybody for sharing. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that on the front end is to make this a more interactive and engaging session. My goal is not to sit here and talk at you, but I want to encourage you to come off mute, ask questions throughout the session, because the goal is making this as useful as possible for you and the challenges that you're facing. And so I'm going to give kind of a high-level overview of the process. I'll share my screen. I have a couple slides and examples that we'll go through. When you think about applying for a job, it's kind of like a funnel. And so at the top are all of the jobs you can apply for. You need to, what I would recommend for any job you want to apply for is print out the job description. So it's a physical piece of paper, and then get a highlighter and a pen so that you can mark it up, because you need to customize your resume based on what's in that position description in order to get past what's called an applicant tracking system, which is a computer algorithm. Even before AI and ChatGPT and all that stuff, these things have been around for several years, where they compare the position description and the resume, and there are keywords in the position description. If less than about 70% of them, if you don't have at least 70% of them in your resume, the algorithm will say it's not a good fit, and no human being will look at your resume. It is impossible to get a job if no human being looks at your resume. So step one is we got to beat the robots, and it does involve some strategies with keyword stuffing that we'll get into in a minute. After the resume, you usually will also write a cover letter. And the cover letter is designed to add some color commentary about yourself. It's kind of like a one-page document introducing your work history, professional skills, and personal interests in applying for the job. The main purpose of the cover letter is to support the content of the resume, whereas your resume focuses on qualifications and achievements. Your cover letter kind of expands on those achievements. It also showcases your personality a little bit, and like why you'd be a good fit for the company. In terms of best practices, it's a custom cover letter for each job. Proofread it multiple times to make sure you spell the company name right. If you know the hiring manager, you want to address it to them. If you can't find a hiring manager, you can always find the CEO of a company, address the letter to them. If somebody is a mid-level manager who's reviewing it and they see it's addressed to the CEO of the company, they're going to make sure that they read the letter, because this is addressed to that person versus to whom it may concern or dear sir or madam. It's always better to put a real name on the cover letter, and keep it professional and an active voice, and keep it on one page. Cover letters definitely don't need to go onto a second page. And I do, let me share my screen right here just to show you an example. Can I get a thumbs up? Can you guys see this cover letter template?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
You might want to zoom in a little, but yeah.
Yep. And so at the top here, anything in brackets is designed that you'll replace it and fill it in with your info. You want your email up there, you want your cell phone up there. The goal of all of this is that they contact you. So make it very easy. We're going to do it here at the top. We're also in the closing paragraph going to put your phone number, email as well. put the hiring manager's name, the company address. You can find these things on Google. You know, dear Mrs. Smith, introduce yourself. I want to join the company in this role because I love the aspects of the job that you love. You know, talk about where you saw it, like, hey, I saw it on the VFA Connect portal. And then you're given a brief professional background. You don't have to say everything on your resume. Highlight the most important stuff in 1 to 2 sentences. And then there is some boilerplate things here that work pretty well. If you know your Clifton Strengths Finders top 5 strengths, you can put them in there. If not, you can say, you know, my top strengths include, list them out and how you could apply them to this role. Plug in some keywords from the job description, because when somebody puts out a job description, it's basically saying like, hey, we want to hang this beautiful painting on the wall in our office. You are the hammer that's going to hit in the nail that the painting is going to hang on. You don't want to describe yourself as like, oh, I've got a leather handle and I've got a steel head. You want to describe yourself as someone who is well skilled and has experience hanging beautiful paintings that other people's offices have benefited from. So like, it's the so what, like what's the benefit of working with you? And it's going to be the things that they describe in the position description. And now you can kind of go into addition, like, let me highlight some other relevant experience. Here's some roles either at work or in school or the community that you've worked on. This I would say is optional, but if there's a famous person quote that you like that ties into being hardworking and industrious, shows a little bit of personality, you know, you don't want it to feel like a Chat GPT spit out robot letter. Like, make this your own. Highlight that you love the company, they're a leader in whatever industry, and this is great for me to apply, you know, my passion and expertise to that industry. Enthusiasm and eagerness. I know one of the folks as we were doing the intro said like, how do I get more second interviews? It's more enthusiasm. It's like showing up with a big smile on your face, have a cup of coffee, like make sure you're well rested, and genuinely exude. And I hope that I'm modeling this in this session, like an overwhelming desire to work there and to want to help these people and to be someone that people would not only want to work with, but somebody that if you had to travel for work and you and the person interviewing you were stuck in an airport for 8 hours because the flight was delayed, would they want to sit next to you on that bench, or would they want to poke their eyes out after 3 hours of you talking about really boring things that they just like, oh, get me away from this person? Like, you want to pass the stranded in an airport test in a way. And I appreciate that several of you said like, my strength is kind of building relationships, connecting with others, empathizing, like have that shine through in the interview. And then just in closing, like, hey, here's my resume. It's got my info. Would love the opportunity. Sincerely, full name. Does anybody have any questions about the cover letter? Nailed it. All right.
I'm going to jump in with one. So Mike, one of the
Yeah.
things I was reading based off of people's responses in the registration was, how do we compete with people who have so much more experience than us? How can we get this company to take a bet on me versus all these other people with all these other experiences? So how might fellows think about kind of approaching that in the cover letter?
Great question. Smart companies are looking to hire A players based on their slope, not their Y-intercept. And I was a math major, so pardon me I might get a little nerdy here on like the XY axis, but like the Y-intercept is like, how high are you? Like, if you have 10 years of experience, like, yeah, that's going to be higher than somebody who recently graduated college. But somebody might be content just like staying at that level. The slope is like 1. It's not way up and to the right. Whereas if you can communicate in the resume, in the cover letter, in all of the interviews, in the interactions via email before and after interviews, in the handwritten notes that you write and send to interviews. Real quick, raise your hand if you have written and sent a handwritten note to anyone that you've interviewed. Can you hear me now?
Yes, but you're frozen like this for me.
There we go. Am I back?
Yeah. Oh.
There, you're
Oh,
back.
okay.
You're back. Hands moving.
Wonderful. I apologize. I got so excited the internet froze there. And so the reason that I asked that question is because I want all of you a month from now to say, hey, yeah, I've sent handwritten notes. Like that's a non-negotiable. If you want to be successful in this process, you need to treat the job search like a full-time job. Does it take 15 minutes maybe to write a note and go to the post office or even just put it in your mailbox? Yes. And if that 15 minutes results in a job offer and tens of thousands of dollars, like that seems like a pretty good investment. And it's also something that will separate you from the other candidates that aren't sending handwritten notes. And part of that does require, like at the end of the first interview, you want to ask them, hey, I've really enjoyed this. I'd love to send you a thank you note. Like, do you mind providing me like what's the best mailing address to send you a thank you note? And that ended up, oh, okay, and they're probably going to give you their office. They probably may not give you their home address. Totally fine. But I would write it that day and get it sent out. And that's like part of the interview debrief process of like, oh, I had an interview. All right, let me write it. Let me get it in the mail. Because if it takes you a week to write it, like they've already decided whether or not you're moving forward. But that's a little thing that can add value. Additionally, anytime you're interviewing in person, like going into an office, every single human being you interact with gets to decide whether or not they offer you the job. The receptionist, the person who greets you, like moves you through, somebody who sees you briefly in the hallway, like the company is going to have literally every single person be like, so what do you think about them? Do you think their culture is a good fit? There is the, hey, we're measuring their skills, like can they technically do the job? A lot of it though, is this a human being we want to interact with that would fit in with the rest of the team and be a good addition, live up to our core values? So another thing you can do to prepare for the resume, the cover letter, and especially the interview, go on the company's website and their LinkedIn, spend 15 to 30 minutes, learn a little bit more about the company, make sure you can speak intelligently, and see if you can find their core values. A lot of companies on their website list their core values. Write that shit down in your cover letter. Be prepared to talk about how you embody all of those core values. Have a star story about every single core value, right? Any company that I'm working with and advising, I make sure when you're interviewing candidates, what's the question you ask for each core value? There has to be some way that you're measuring that, because if anybody clearly does not embody one of the core values, they are immediately cut. You're not getting the job. I do some CEO coaching. I had a client 2 weeks ago. It's like, hey, we got these two candidates. One is further along in her career. The team kind of likes her, but like I asked her what her hobbies were, and she said sleeping. I was like, well, what else? And she just said sleeping. And one of our core values is like intellectually curious and have a growth mindset. Are you learning and doing things? And if somebody asks like, hey, what do you like to do outside of work? And you just go sleeping, like that's a snooze. Like, no thanks. I'm not going to hire. And I literally said, like, she doesn't match your core values, cut her and explain that to the rest of the team. Even if they liked some of the other things she had with experience, they didn't meet the core values. So that's a big way that you can separate yourself. You can also do some reflection and think about like, what are your personal core values? What are the things that matter to you and how you show up in the world and how you interact with people? And be prepared to demonstrate them in interviews, in how you answer questions and having stories and anecdotes that highlight the time when you were relentlessly generous or enthusiastically fun. Happened to be two of my company's core values. Another one is like independently productive and flexibly learning. So like if people are like, oh yeah, I can always Google my way to victory or go to YouTube University and learn stuff. I'm like, okay, that's what I'm looking for. Like you're gonna figure it out. That's great. What questions do you have about what we just talked about? All right, I can keep going then, but I'm gonna try to pause. Julia, you got anything you want to add in there?
Yeah,
Oh,
oh, go ahead, Curtis. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so you mentioned something about how you would stand out against people who have more experience than you, and you talked about demonstrating how you have a bigger slope. Like, how would you go about doing that in interviews?
A lot of it ties into having a growth mindset. And one, that means you actually have to have one and not feel like you already know everything and you don't need to learn and grow. Two, have stories and anecdotes about books you're reading or books you've read recently, or, hey, if they're in, let's say it's a K through 12 ed tech company, doing some sort of cool learning thing, research it a little bit, like watch some videos on YouTube about ed tech and the industry, and have, come in and like share something you've learned about trends in that industry. That's like, oh, okay, wow. Like they're learning, they're growing, and cite the fact that I love I say it all the time, like I'm a student of the game. Like I'm here to learn and grow. I'm not the master of all things. I'm not like the NBA Finals MVP. Like I'm a student of the game. I'm still looking to get better. I'll work on my mid-range jumper in the off season, and apply that to the skills you need for the role. And especially like I've interviewed people, and one of the things we'll do is ask them like their technical tool competency, like how well do you know how to use Notion and Google Drive and all this stuff, and I ask like, are you interested in learning more? Like you better say yes to like all of the things, unless you're a 5 out of 5 and you already know everything. And when somebody does that between interview 1 and 2, and I've interviewed 2, and they're like, oh yeah, I'd never heard of Notion, but like I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, I started playing around with myself, like this thing's awesome, I can't wait to use it with your company. Like boom, Laura got hired. So like showing that proactivity, like if there's a tool of like, hey, you got to use C# or something, like, I don't know what that is, Google it, start studying it a little bit, and be able to go in an interview and be like, I know I don't have a lot of experience in C#, but I'm a quick learner. I signed up for this free coding course online. I made my Hello World project. I'm on to project 3 now. That's one of the ways to show that slope. Yeah, Curtis, is there any part of your question that I didn't answer?
No, that was a good answer. So pretty much just demonstrate that you're learning and growing your skill set.
Yep. And people, and here, let me drop this list in here. So I have a list of job interview questions that I'm going to pull up over here. These are questions to prepare yourself to potentially be asked, and I will zoom in. Oops. Cool. Can you guys see this? Okay. Each of the first dots is the question. The indented dots are coaching on how to answer the question better. And so tell me a bit about yourself. Like that's always the first question I ask. Hey, tell me what your unique ability is. That's the same as what are your biggest strengths. And politely, I think all of you can do better on crafting how you respond to what are your biggest strengths, and tell me a little bit about yourself. And copy this over here. Hold on a sec. I'm going to share this with you guys as well to kind of build out a cheat sheet of like, all right, hey, what are the 3 to 5 key points that I want? Why are you awesome? What are your strengths? Everybody's going to ask you too, like, what are your areas for development or weaknesses? The key is that you don't say, oh yeah, I suck at being organized. You say, oh, well, you know what? Time management has been a development area for me. But since senior year, I started using Google Calendar, and I kind of color coded time, and I'm learning how to time block to make sure I get tasks done on time. So you acknowledge you're not good at it, and that you have a plan that you're actively deploying on getting better at it. You cannot say, oh, my biggest weakness is I care too much. Like that's BS. You don't want to blow smoke at people. You can also highlight a weakness or area for development that's not on the position description. Like if you're coming in for a marketing role and you learned in college and like you don't like Excel models and financial models and spreadsheets, like you say, hey, one of my weaknesses, like I love design and creative and marketing and storytelling. I'm just really not good at the financial modeling part of it. Like I took a, accounting class in college, and I realized that was not the career path for me. That's totally fine. You're allowed to not be good at something that isn't the job you're applying for. And that is also telling the truth, and then being vulnerable, acknowledging that you have all figured out. Doing some research site on LinkedIn to understand like who are the other people you might be working with, and if you can name drop like, oh yeah, I know, I can tell by Chad's LinkedIn post that he's been working on this new initiative. Like I'd love to work with him, and one idea was that we could do this thing. Just bringing those ideas into an interview shows that you've done the research on the company. You also want to highlight like how this fits into your short and long-term goals. Like ideally, this is a 2+ year relationship. through VFA, are you going to stay on afterward? If they're investing a lot of time, attention, money, energy, and effort into training you, they want to see the ROI and get that over time. And then if you mention, hey, in the next 25 years, like I'd love to start my own ed tech company and would love to learn as much as I can in this environment, help you guys build and grow and scale, wear as many different hats across the team. That's pretty interesting. And then before you go into interviews, and like a key homework assignment from this is for you to write your 3 to 5 sentence elevator pitch, which is the answer to the first question. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and memorize it and nail it and be able to tell it with enthusiasm and zest. And like, hey, I'm Mike Malloy from Millersville, Maryland. Went up to Boston College. I studied math and computer science, launched my career at Deloitte. Deloitte was kind enough to pay for me to go to Georgetown. I got my master's in computer science. And then I followed the typical career path to traveling sunglasses salesman and ran this company. I learned there's for-profits, nonprofits, or no profits. We ended up at the bottom and I went bankrupt at 30, worked my way back up to a nonprofit. It's been 5 years running the Halcyon Incubator, supporting early stage social entrepreneurs who are changing the world. Around that time, I started teaching at Georgetown, been an entrepreneur in resident there for 8 years. I taught social entrepreneurship and a startup internship seminar that matches startups with students who need internships. And you may have heard about a little global pandemic a few years ago. During COVID, my wife and I left DC. We moved to the beach in Delaware. And when the incubator said, come back to the office, I said, no, thank you, and launched Malloy Industries, which I've been running for 3 years. Tell you about it. Boom, I have that stuff nailed. Okay, there's no hesitation. There's no ooh. And I give a few hooks that people can latch onto and ask more about. Like I entered at a sunglass company and go bankrupt. Well, tell me more about that. Like an incubator. Okay. So figure out how you tell your personal background, your experience, talk about the skill sets. Because again, there's skills that they need to hang this painting on the wall that this job is. And then how you can apply them. And then I also want you to map out 5-star stories that you can tell in interviews with kind of the situation, task, action, results. Another thing I'm going to give you as a resource is these kind of verbs for strong action verbs. Kind of went through that one as well. And then the rest of these questions, you can go study on your own. And another piece of advice I have for you for preparation is to identify one or more people in your network that will have a mock interview with you. And that you can literally just give them this Google Doc and say, ask me a series of these questions in any order. And then they can know, hey, did they do this when they told me a story about their biggest achievement? Or did you say my biggest achievement was, winning the intramural soccer trophy? Full stop. Wait, what? In interviews, the answer should never be 7 words or 1 sentence. You want to have a 30-second to 2-minute answer that you've rehearsed a little bit that talks about the situation and how you got a team together of people on your floor and in your classes, and so got injured and broke his leg in the middle of the season, so we had to overcome adversity, and you switched from being the forward scoring all the goals to being the goalkeeper because you lost your goalie, but even in that new role you were able to cheer on the defense and lead the team and yada yada yada. So like make it an engaging narrative that talks about your team building, your interpersonal skills, your leadership, even if it's an athletic accomplishment. And I want to be cognizant, do we have a hard stop in 2 minutes, or can we roll for a couple extra?
Oh, I think I had the end at the hour mark. So I think we have 16.
Oh, great. Fantastic. I wasn't trying to slow down, but I thought it might be at 45 minutes. Let me pause though and see what questions do you all have. I've tried to touch on a few of the different parts of the process, but what other questions do you have? All right. In that case, I'm going to go into, Dre, did you have something?
Yeah, I've been noodling. I just keep noodling on this question of like, what is the advantage of like you and where, like you all fellows of where you are in your career versus an experienced person? Because I know you're competing with people in this job market with a lot more experience with you. And I think that growth mindset really hits it. And I want to add a couple more things that I've been thinking about, and I'm curious how it resonates and doesn't. And haven't quite nailed the language of this, so bear with me on that. But I just want to add a couple of things. One, I think that youth and being early on in your career, you have an opportunity to really play at excitement, enthusiasm, and passion. I think using that, but it has to be authentic, right? So like, don't BS, but use that to your advantage where it resonates. I think another advantage that you have is that so all of these companies are sourced through Venture for America, right? So they're companies that we have actual relationships with, humans, people that we actually know. And they are invested in Venture for America's mission, right? In terms of economic opportunities, American cities through entrepreneurship. You all are doing VFA because you want to work at a startup and have an outsized impact, and you care about that city and their impact. Those are two differentiators that make you special, in addition to any other reason that you care about that specific role in company. So I would encourage you to really highlight that and filling into that passion and that why, because you're there to learn how to make an outsized impact, to learn how a startup works, and to make an impact in that city, right? Some other things, mindset, back to growth mindset, which we talked about in training camp too, and just now, viewing everything as a learning opportunity is so important. When you have people who have been in their roles for a long, long time, sometimes people can get fixed in their ways or think about how to do something in a certain, like, this is the system I use for this. You don't necessarily have that. You're coming in with an open mind, viewing everything as a learning opportunity, and willing to be flexible and get your hands dirty in a lot of different ways, try a lot of different things, because that's where you, like, theoretically, that might be where you are with your career. And then I think the other piece is, and Mike touched on this, just want to double down on it, is like learning things quickly, like being able to show that and knowing that you can do that because you don't have the experience, but that you can't know how to do things quickly and perhaps maybe faster than anybody else is a huge value add. And then I would just say, like, that hunger to make an impact. Like, that speaks volumes. So I wanted to just sort of like further break it out. And I'm curious how that all resonates, and if anyone, Mike, what you think, if you want to add anything to that as well, but just wanted to sprinkle in a little bit more from that conversation.
Any feedback from the fellows? What do you think about that?
Yeah, what do you think? Does that resonate? Thumbs up, medium, down? Josh is giving me a thumbs up. I would say.
All right.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sparking that. Yeah.
I love, and Julia, I'm gonna build on that, and I just looked this up. Can you guys see this Venn diagram here? So this is a book summary. There's a book called The Ideal Team Player. My mom got it from me a few years ago. Awesome book, parable. You don't have to read the book. I'll share the link to this little summary. There are 3 characteristics of the ideal team player. And you said hungry, and that's, Julia, immediately I was like, oh, hungry, like that is one of the 3 characteristics. They're also smart, and this is where the growth mindset comes in, and they're humble. Like, you can't have an ego. You can't think that there's anything below you of like, oh, like, I'm not going to go set up chairs for that event. Like, why doesn't somebody else do that? Like, oh, go get coffee. I'm not saying you should only go get coffee or like do the low things, but like, when I first started my career, I worked at Deloitte as an analyst, and I got invited to a lot of meetings because the partners learned that I could type as fast as they can talk, which meant I took really good notes. I didn't really say anything, but they put me at the end of the coffee table, or end of the table, and I just take notes and have action items. And at the end, I'd be like, okay, Joe, you're doing this. Vishal, you're doing that. Raj, you're doing that. And that was my way of like learning a lot about business and being involved in more meetings, because I was able to add value. And for the higher up people who, are making 6 figures and have been doing stuff for decades, they don't necessarily want to take notes in meetings. But if that's something you can do, there are AI tools now that help with it. But even just like helping project manager, like, hey, I'll follow up, I'll send the recap email. And in Asana, our project management tool, assign that, hey, Med, you got to do these 2 things. Jose, you got to do that. And so when you get to this middle thing, that's great. If you're just smart, maybe you're a charmer, but if you're not hungry, you're this lovable slacker. So like the Venn diagram, like, you don't want to be a lovable slacker. People like you get along well, you don't actually do shit. you know, versus the skillful politician who like isn't humble and is kind of a jerk. And like Two-Face is like, don't do that. Don't ever say anything about any human being. Like you're past middle school. Like middle school, everybody was mean. You know, we're not going to unpack the childhood trauma here of bullies in middle school, but I'm going to say as adults, there's no need to gossip. There's no need to talk about other people or behind their back unless you're saying good things. And whether or not the person can overhear it, if they through the grapevine hear that you're like, oh my God, like Julia was so great. Like she did an awesome job, like organizing that webinar and all the other amazing things she does. Like you say that to Emmeline, and then like she finds that email thread 3 weeks later. She's like, oh, wow, Josh really liking it. Okay, cool. Like they feel good about themselves. Like that's the goal. And the last one here I want to highlight is like, you don't want to be an accidental mess maker who is humble and willing to do stuff and is hardworking, but isn't smart. And it's just like making everything harder because they're not learning along the way. So I wanted to add that. I also wanted to highlight that when you're young, you work to learn. When you're older, you work to earn. And so the goal of this first job and fellowship and everything, it's not to make hundreds of thousands of dollars and get a yacht and a private island. It's to get the skills so that you can get those things later on in life. And if there are two opportunities and one pays you $5,000 more, but you're not going to learn anywhere near as much as you would in the other one, I'd pick the other one. You know, make sure Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can cover your basic needs. And ultimately, like whatever you do in this fellowship and this first role, like the skills that you are leveling up, you bring with you for the whole rest of your career, which is amazing. Like I ran a sunglass company for 6 years, learned a lot, grew, but I went bankrupt. Like I had to move back in my parents' basement with no money at age 30. It was a very humbling low point in my career, but I learned so much in those 6 years. That's why I'm qualified to be leading this webinar. I worked with more than 100 interns and like entry-level staff throughout my career. Like these are the rare and valuable skills, which you might call career capital, that you're acquiring, that you're leveling up on. You think about like an RPG or video game, like there are different skills that you can get better at that just compound, and there's this compounding effect and you keep getting better and better. And that's one, like how you can maximize the value after you get the job. And understanding that on the front end is why it's worth investing all of your time and attention and energy to research the companies, to prepare, to script out how you're going to answer these questions, to rehearse saying them by yourself, to rehearse saying them in front of a mirror, to record a voice note on your phone answering the questions and listen to it and be like, hey, let me, you know, like, I'm really good. You know, like the tone and the inflection there is communicating, I'm not confident, you know, versus, yeah, I've been using Calendly for 3 years. I know that I can coordinate all the schedules for the team and set you guys up for success so you can focus on the bigger picture strategic initiatives while I'm making sure that the operational day-to-day of the company are running smoothly. You know, something like that. They're like, oh, he did the little hand steeple. This means he must be competent. You know, the other thing that I was going to add too, with the benefit of being young, did any of you guys ever read Animal Farm in like high school English class? It's still a book. Okay, yeah. Again, like the puppies in that book that they like trained to be like attack dogs because they didn't know any better. That's kind of what you are. And I don't know that I would reference Animal Farm in an interview in this sense. But as you're thinking about the value, it's like, I'm not coming in with biases or preconceived notions of how to do things like, oh, I always did it in a Google spreadsheet. You know, now you need me to use Box and Excel and Microsoft Online. Like, oh, I won't do that. It's a waste of time. Because you're like, oh, this is your system. These are your SOPs. Great. I'm happy to follow your standard operating procedures. And like, I like making SOPs because I'm going to be your ops person. So, you know, I can certainly make more in the format that you like because I know what you like. The last piece that I wanted to add here too was just understanding the importance of the manager and direct report relationship. People don't quit companies, people quit managers. And put that in your back pocket. Promise you, at some point in the next 25 years, you will quit a job and it will be because your manager wasn't good, didn't support you, was toxic, didn't demonstrate the leadership attributes that you want. And so the interview process, yes, they are scouting you and vetting you. You're also vetting them and making sure that it is a good fit, and to be cognizant as you go in that you want someone who's going to be a mentor, who's going to like guide you and nurture you throughout your career, who cares enough to invest the time in you. I remember when I was 22, I had my first like year-end review, and I gave myself a 1 and everything. I was like, I'm great. Like, give me a promotion, biggest raise possible. It's awesome. And I was a straight A kid in college. Like, actually, that's not true. I was a straight A kid in high school. I was a B+ kid in college. I got 3.3. Like, that was good enough. But I was used to being like top achiever. And so when I had my year in review, I got a 3 out of 5. And I was like, shit. And he started getting my manager started giving me feedback. And looking back, like I was very defensive. I was like, no, but like I did this, and like, yeah, I asked for that, but I didn't do. He said, Mike, take a breath. The goal of this conversation isn't for you to be defensive. It's to actually be open and receptive to feedback. And what I would frame this now is like that I have a coachable spirit. And he told me this lesson that I will never forget. He's like, if somebody is giving you feedback, it's a gift. And you need to welcome and receive that gift, and understand that if you bite the hand and slap them like no and like push back and like aren't open to it, then people are going to stop giving you feedback. And what's going to happen is they're going to stop caring about you, and they're going to say it's not worth my time and energy to give a best person feedback because they don't take it well. And like on the team, there were 3 of us. One of the guys was like supposed to be at work at 9, showed up at 9:30, 10, 10:15, had gotten the feedback a couple times and still did it. And I noticed that like managers just like checked out. They're like, I don't care about Ashish. Like he's not, we're stuck with him. Like he's not an A player. We're not going to invest the time and energy in nurturing him and making him better. Whereas I took that to heart and was like, hey, like what can I do better? I know there's areas for improvement. And my second year end, I did get a 1. I got a promotion and a raise and everything. That's a really important lesson. So I want you to keep that in mind, that throughout the process, if someone's giving you feedback, be open to receiving it. And I'm going to drop these meeting agenda templates in the chat. I would bookmark these forever. I use them every day. There are a variety of different meetings in there. One of them is the manager direct report one-on-one agenda, which is something that you can set up and kind of bring as a structure to your fellowship to say, hey, like I'm looking forward to having a one-on-one every Monday with you. I thought maybe we could just use this Google Doc as a running agenda. I'll prepare it each week. I'll have topics in there and like questions I have for you, and take notes in it. And that goes a long way to taking the weight off of the manager, who probably has 17 other things they're trying to do and may or may not be super thrilled to have a direct report and may or may not have experience managing direct reports if it's a startup and you're their first one. And so the other agendas too, like the friend, former colleague one is great for catching up. The intro first coffee chat is really useful for like interviewing, informational interviews, or getting advice about an industry or a company that you're interested in. Yeah, quick question. It does affect, and let me do this, and I know we've got 2 minutes. I'm going to name this tune real quick. So here's an example of a position description, and some of the words are highlighted here. And so the things that are highlighted are examples of the keywords that you want to put in your resume. And this is a real example of how I helped my older sister get a job a couple years ago. And so here's what they believe, like these are their values. This is great. Come over to her resume. You've got contact info here at the top. Your resume should have a subheadline and maybe a headline, subheadline that maps to what is the position you're applying for. And so in this case, it's a school counselor. This executive summary needs to be updated for each job you're applying for. And this is a place to stuff those keywords. Everything from here up is a place to stuff keywords. The professional experience in your education, leadership, and volunteer, like that's the same for everybody. You're not really changing that. I do want you to have 3 to 5 bullet points with strong action verbs for each job, and I'll share a set of strong action verbs. So yeah, I'll send you an email with stuff that we've talking about, so it's easy to forward along. And then the core competencies, these tie into what was in the position description. Like they said Microsoft Office, they said Google Suite, they said time management, they said communication, they said conflict resolution, they said mental health and wellness. So you're putting these things in there such that when they compare the two, they're going to show up. This format of saying core competencies and then having like a little character here that you can do this, you could do like a little bar, it doesn't have to be super fancy, What is really important though is that you submit your resume as a Word document, and that in the title of it, you don't just say resume. The company gets dozens of resumes. Who knows how they're going to find it? You want your full name, resume, and then the company name there so that you can keep track of, did I send the right one of the right people? But that way, if they're like, oh, Josh B something, like where's his resume? So if they search Josh B in their folder, they're going to find it. And so that is really important. Similar with the cover letter, put your full name and save it as a Word document. And the reason it's a Word document, especially for the resume, is it guarantees that the applicant tracking system can read it versus the PDF. It doesn't always get all the characters, and there could be some funky processing with it.
Amazing. Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. It was really appreciated it. We have one more question from Bintu. I'm not sure if you have a couple.
As I go to that question, I would love, folks, if you could just share in the chat what was most useful for you today. We talked through a bunch of stuff. Like I'm a student of the game with a growth mindset. Would love to know, what we talked about today that was most useful for you. And I will look at how can I use my skills for roles. Oh, great question. To kind of communicate that they're transferable skills. Think about a story or two in your life where you already transferred a skill, and like something you learned as a lifeguard, you applied to being a office assistant or another job later, or something you learned about leadership on a team, in a sports team in high school, you applied to a group project in college. And give me 1 second. And basically, you want to show that you've already transferred them. And then you can even say, I applied it to this group project in college. And if you hired me to work on the product management team, I'd love to apply it there with you and Shirley and Joe, who you did some LinkedIn research in and are also on that team, or the manager, mentioned in the interview. And the other thing that you can do, and this is a good pro tip for anytime there are features and benefits. So like you have features, these strengths, these skills, these things, and there are benefits that the company can get from them. They care about the benefit, the so what. So you can say, I can type as fast as people can talk, feature, which means I'm a great addition to any meeting to capture full notes and action items, so you don't have to get bogged down in the details of note taking and can focus on solving complex problems and knowing that everybody on the team's gonna be able to follow up on the action items afterwards. That was a big whole set of benefits I just kind of made up there based on the feature, the strength that I have of typing really fast. And I'll throw out there, if you can't type 60 words a minute, sign up for an online typing test. Like that's a skill for the rest of your life that will save you hundreds of hours of time if you get better at typing fast. Yeah, and let's just see what we're getting in the chat here. Resume format was helpful. Gross mind, yeah, enthusiasm too. Like be high energy, take a few deep breaths, sit up straight, like think about your posture. Forgot to mention, like if it's a Zoom thing as well, do perhaps a virtual background. Like I open the window in front of me. What you don't want to do is like have all of your son's toys in the background strewn all around and like be super distracting. Make it look professional, put on a shirt with a collar. For me, bonus points if it's Hawaiian, but doesn't have to be. Think about ways to communicate your personality, the fact that somebody would want to go through the trenches with you, solve hard problems, be a team player, sit on an airport bench for 8 hours, and like enjoy the time. Cool. Med, great notes. I love these. Meeting agendas, great. Yeah, the email within 24 hours plus the handwritten note. If you're interviewing in person, you can also potentially like write the handwritten note before the interview, or maybe like, this is tough. I don't like the, hey, I have this note and I wrote it even before we talked. I like the, got it in my bag and I can like go out to my car write it and reference one or two things we talked about in the interview, and then like come back in and hand it and be like, hey, can you give this to Shirley? Like that's a stellar move. Yeah, lobby, exactly. Cool. Yeah, make that specific reference. And I will throw out there too, if folks want to follow up or connect, there's my LinkedIn and my email address. Happy to be a resource and support you both today and like we connect on LinkedIn and in 7 years you're like, hey, VFA was awesome. I worked there for a while. I'm starting my own thing now. I'm looking for investors, customers, whatever. Like, hit me up. I love having those conversations. I teach at Georgetown. My favorite thing is like, I taught student Robert as a freshman in social entrepreneurship. He took my senior year startup internship seminar, worked at McKinsey for 2 years, and quit in April to start his own AI ML consulting company. And we've been talking once a month since then. It's awesome. Like, I'm like, yes, let's go. Like, I'm trying to get people into entrepreneurship to grow there, to realize too, like, you don't have to be the Mark Zuckerberg, the founder with some brilliant idea. Go be the 5th, 25th, 100th employee. You're gonna fall in love with it. You're gonna learn so much more than people that are just like making TPS reports as an audit analyst. Like, that stuff is not nearly as fun as entrepreneurship land. So yeah, I'm excited for your journey and here to cheer you on along the way.
On that note, let's give Mike an off-mute round of applause. Thank you so much. Woo!
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. And here's all right. Can I take a little group picture real quick as we're wrapping up?
Absolutely.
3, 2, 1. Awesome. Love it. Well, thank you all for this opportunity.